Lexicon of Odds and Tales. Copyright 2025. Charles Arlington. This is a work of fiction. All characters, organizations, and events are representations of imagination, and any instances of real-world people, events, or places, no matter the condition, are only coincidental. All rights reserved. No portion of this book may be reproduced in any form without permission from the publisher, except as permitted by U.S. copyright law. Story 2. The Cave Golem's Creation. Hooey, so dumb, me and my rocks, so clums, pondered a medium-sized creature, a golem. Short and stout was his head, and wide was his torso. His feet were big, and his hands were unfit for precise work or labour. Wandering out from his home, a small cave, the golem journeyed past a series of tall, standing trees, and then crossed a pasture of lilacs and dandelions, before spotting in front of himself an adult-age male working upon a plot of land. The golem watched from behind a fence, spotting the man digging up a perfectly circular hole in the ground, and placing a small tree sapling inside with gentle placement. Something seemed good in this, perhaps inspiring, and the golem wandered away, unearthing his own clump of dirt with a fern inside. Re-entering his home, the golem placed the plant beside himself and dug his hands into the dirt of the cave, stretching his fingers outward for the perfect circle, removing a large tuft of dirt with one haughty drag of his hand. The golem had left not a perfect hole within the ground, but an unsophisticated gash across his home's floor. Shivering his stony brow, the golem clutched to his head. "Ooh! No! No do! But maybes be fit," pondered the golem, grabbing the dirt clump with the baby fern inside. "You go inside!" Holding the clump of soil together tight, the golem had rested the plant down, unclenching his fists about it. Hummed the golem satisfactorily, tilting his head at the plant. Raising his stony brows, the golem had suddenly noticed a new development occurred. Half of the plant had been damaged. Tragically, half of the plant's roots had been scrunched together, with the roots on the left side of the fern being bent enough that the left side of the fern's fingers had been wilting leftward, opposed to the other side standing upright. Cusping his giant hands down towards the broken fern strands, the golem clutched each one in his palm, attempting to hold them upright. Removing his hand, the golem watched as the fern's left strands wilted once more. "No!" groaned the golem, clutching at the fern's left strands again, this time snapping them at their roots and unrooting them from their soil upon correction. Sprawling his hands forward in corrective horror, the golem opened his clenched palm, watching the broken fern limbs fall from his hand. Pacing his eyes about his hands, the golem looked between his fingers, his palms, and the broken fern beneath him, increasing in respiration. "No!" bemoaned the golem, deepening his brow. "No! Grah!" roared the golem, thrashing upon the plant beneath him, destroying all the fern's remaining strands, thereafter unearthing the gashed ground and throwing numerous dirt clumps across his cave home's interior, forcefully landing each clump against the walls. "Stupid's clums! Stupid's golem no plans! Grah!" lamented the golem, throwing another clump of soil at the cave's wall across him. Heightening his temper, the golem had completely destroyed uprooted, and thrown his fern's remains, all before collapsing his hands in his sullen face. "No, hooey! Me's so dumb, me's no gentle, me's can't lay planty roots," sulked the golem, laying atop the ground in wallowed pity for a passing 10 minutes. "Yaw, me's no good, good's at nothing," yawned the golem, passing into sleep. When the next day sprang forth from the earth's crest, a curtain of orange and yellow sprawled across the lands outside the golem's cave. The meadows danced to their morning breeze, and the trees sang along to the wind. Wandering out from his home, the golem stepped into the nearby running creek, soaking his face in the brushing waters and rolling about the shallow banks before placing caught fish within his mouth. Having fully rinsed and fed himself, the golem wandered out across the pasture of lilacs and dandelions, spotting the same man from the day before at his plot of seeded land. Watching carefully from behind a fence post, the golem watched the man, who had been placing down a row of stones and paving the slits between them next to a dirt pathway, which led to the farming plot. Contemplating the man's careful labour, the golem watched for 20 minutes before he left the man's property, heading for home. Collecting a stack of rocks into his right arm as he journeyed home, the golem then placed them beside himself as he entered his cavernous abode. Stacking the rocks atop one another, the golem started with the smallest pebble, before selecting the largest rock at random and placing it atop. The large rock clunked over, landing at a slant atop the small pebble. No, droned the golem, removing the large rock and setting the small rock aside. Looking about, the golem pondered the man who had paved his own stone slabs, and so the golem wandered back to the creek nearby, collecting mud where he could find. Returning to his home once more, the golem placed the thinnest rock, which resembled to him a stone slab atop his home's floor. Slopping a mud clump atop the rock, the golem pressed his monstrous hand against the flattening mud, before placing another thin slab atop the mud layer. Although it was not a perfect placement, the second thin slab laid atop the mud layer at only a slightly horizontally slanted angle, but still resembled the man's stone wall and its stone laying remarkably well, given the difference of materials. Patting out another layer of mud atop the second rock slab, the golem grabbed another rock, mostly thin, but somewhat larger, and rounded on the right end of the rock. Yees, mumbled the golem, padding the slanted rock's surface with mud, before placing the previous small rock where the slanted rock was vertically lowest. Carefully holding the small rock in place with a somewhat clumsily wobbling hand, the golem filled the space in between and atop the small rock and slanted rock with mud. Unsophisticated as it was, the muddied wall of rocks had now grown to be 3 layers tall. Finding pleasure in his work, the golem continued to pad out the layers of rock with mud, finding the different sizes of rocks to place beneath or atop the pile, where smaller rocks sat atop the larger ones. Now that all the smallest rocks had been placed in a muddied stack, the golem lifted up the hefty stone stack to place it atop the largest rock of all. With a muddy layer waiting atop the largest rock, the golem had finished the 9th layer of stone. Stepping back, the golem tilted his head, noticing the rock stack sat at an odd slant due to the largest rock's unequal form. Whimpered the Golem, looking from his left to right, before spotting the gashed floor to his left. His stony brow raised for half a second. Ooh! Walking over to his rock stack, the Golem placed his thick hide fingers beneath the rock stack's bottom. Humph! Grunted the Golem, carrying it for 3 paces before placing the greatest portion of the large rock's form into the gash's deepest layer. Stepping back once more, the Golem tilted his head, finding that for once his creation had not met his accustomed vision. Ooh! Awed the Golem, straightening his neck and head upright, staring upon his creation as it too sat upright before him. Ooh! Chimed the Golem. So pretty! Finding his eyes hung low, the Golem fell into gracious slumber.